I'm sorry to have to bring you back here. I just wasn't clear on one thing. What do you think threw Gary over the edge?
Video games.
Video games?
Look, I wasn't really into video games, but Gary and I were kind of on and off, and I knew that boys were into that stuff, right? So I just went along with it and pretended to enjoy playing. I have to admit, though, some of the games were kind of fun. One of our favorites was Need for Speed. The idea was to win the race, but we had as much fun crashing into each other or just trying to run each other off the course. But that was before Gary got a demo of the game God of War. I remember him being totally blown away by it. For a couple of weeks, that's all he ever did after school. I remember one day, his mom, she came into the room just wanting him to turn off the game and go out and play. But it was like Gary didn't even hear her. He was just so into that game. She said it again, and Brandon, he told her to get the F out of his room. But Gary didn't even look up. His mom was totally stunned that he had said that. Of course, Gary didn't notice a thing. He was way too busy playing. At one point, I remember going to the bathroom, and there she was in the kitchen, actually crying a little. She confided in me that Gary had become very difficult. She said he wasn't cooperative about doing chores, and that he'd blow up every time he got upset. It's weird, though, because with me, he was so soft-spoken and gentle, like he was two different people. Gary was definitely changing, definitely getting darker and angrier, although sometimes he'd be the old Gary, you know, funny and charming and goofy. I remember one day he called me up just saying he wanted to go to the park. Usually, we just sit under a tree near the parking lot and talk and drink, and maybe smoke a joint. But this time, there was someplace he really wanted to get to. You could tell there was something on his mind, because as soon as we got into the park, he was like, let's go up the hill. Now, it's a pretty big hill, so I was like huffing and puffing. I really have to quit smoking. So anyway, we got up there, and he took this gun out of his pocket. See, first, I thought it was a toy gun, but then he told me it was real, that he had paid $30 for it. I asked what he was gonna do with it, and I won't use the words he used, but basically, he said he was gonna blow away all the losers at school. But then he just laughed and said he was kidding, so we just sat around and kissed and stuff.
What exactly is the goal of God of War?
To kill everyone you see.
I went to 3 high schools, and in none of them did I feel for a moment safe. High school was terrifying, and it was the casual cruelty of the popular kids that made it hell.
What's it like teaching 10th grade?
Well, if you're going to teach 10th grade English, you have to be prepared for some off-the-wall stuff, especially from a kid like Gary Sear. You see kids like him every year, and you get the feeling that they're at war in their mind, you know, fighting this constant battle inside themselves, as well with everyone around them. I remember Gary read poetry that sounded like plots for nightmarish action movies. Poems about automatic weapon fire, heads being torn off, the smell of burning flesh, skulls being crushed, and brain splatter all over the halls, bombs, people begging for mercy before getting their throats slit, and then just blowing yourself away. You could almost assume it was satire, except for a kid like Gary, it was dead serious. There were times where you wanted to take him by the shoulders and just shake him. Like, come on, wake up, you have your whole life ahead of you. Buckle down, work hard, go on a date, go to college, and get on with it. At the request of the police, I went back and collected some of Gary's writings. It struck me how certain themes came out, not necessarily in one piece of writing, but in the body of work as a whole. It was clear that Gary felt weak and defenseless. He would often write about characters that were being teased and picked on amidst all the gore. They were very aggressive, more like you were in some extremely violent video game. The characters in his stories were always getting some kind of revenge, always on the attack with weapons capable of mass destruction. As for the athletics boys, look, I'm in the English department, and you can imagine how it feels when you hear that most of the school budget goes towards athletics. But you have to understand that a lot of these boys would be lost without athletics. They're simply never going to be scholars. This is the playing field they've chosen to compete in, and unfortunately, it's a lot more expensive than an English classroom. A great season here may be the highlight of their life, but even if it isn't, the lessons and discipline they learn on the team will serve them well in whatever they choose to do. It just may be that for these boys, those lessons are more important than Shakespearean sonnets.
How many kids ostracized, humiliated, and assaulted in North American high schools, like the survivors of Columbine, are left scared for life? How many commit suicide every year? So long as some kids go out of their way to make high school hell for others, some kids are going to crack. And trust me, not all kids who crack will quietly off themselves.
Being a guidance counselor, did you ever notice anything off about Gary?
Well, Gary was only brought to my attention not so long ago. I have a teacher friend here, and she introduced me to him. She told me I might have to talk to him, so I got him into my office and asked him if everything was okay. Of course, he wouldn't tell me anything. You know, he practically yes ma'am, no ma'am me to death. I couldn't get a word out of him, but then you look at him, and you can tell there's something wrong with him. You can see the pain or the sadness. I didn't know what it was, but there was something there. I decided to ignore it because I had another 50 students just like him, feeling just about the same thing, you know, not wanting to tell me anything. And then I had another 350 students that I had to watch over. So what was I supposed to do? I remember a certain incident that really marked me. I was talking to Gary in the hall, and Sam Flatch came along. He gave him the slightest nudge, the kind of thing that happens 1,000 times a day in a school like this. You know, the halls are really crowded. At first, I really thought he overreacted. He made a fist and he started muttering under his breath. I told him to relax. It wasn't just a big deal, you know, just a little push, not a big deal. And then he looked at me and he told me, no, miss, it's not just a push. Not when it happens every day. Even then, I didn't believe him, you know. Now I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I? What if it is constant, unrelenting torment to these children? What if high school feels like a trap? You know, something they can't get out of? A little grain of salt doesn't hurt your skin, but that same amount of salt in a wound, it can really, really sting. We live in a culture of such brutality. Violence, even when it's fake, we enjoy it. You know, we watch it on TV, and we don't even notice. What does that say about us? I'm sorry, when it comes into our schools, we can't just be expected to say, boys will be boys. After all, look at what it leads to. Every year you hear about a kid walking to a school, you know, and shooting up the place, you know, shooting his teachers and his classmates. These kids live in normal communities, just like ours, with other schools and other people. You might think it's random, but it's not. It's a message. And the sooner we wake up and listen to it, the better it's going to be.
Did you know his girlfriend, Allison Finley, the girl that got the gun away from him?
Actually, Allison kind of worried me too. You know, she came to school in dirty clothes, and sometimes, to be blunt, she kind of smelled. I was worried for her, not only because I didn't know if there was something wrong at home, or if it was just because of what people were saying in the hallways. Allison was a little underweight, but she was a very pretty girl, very smart as well. You'd hear things in the hallways, you know, and you had no way of knowing if they were true. All I could do was hope they weren't. Because she had good grades, I never saw her into my office. The stupid system. If you don't have a problem in class or a behavioral issue, we just don't see these kids. So I didn't see Allison Finley in my office, ever.
A student from Columbine, as well as an old friend of both shooters, had this to say. Every day, being picked and teased on, being pushed up against lockers, the casual feeling of fear in high school. There are two ways to respond to fear. You either have fear, or you take action and have hate. But we all know that there is another solution. Ask for help.
Thanks for being here, Mrs. Sear. How's Gary doing?
Not well. Not well at all. You know, I can't begin to count how many times on a Saturday around noon I'd knock on Gary's door and find him still in bed, wide awake, simply laying there, not doing a single thing. He just lay there. I suggest he go outside, find someone to do something with. He always said he would in a minute, but sometimes he wouldn't get out of bed until 3 or 4. I always felt as if there was something inside keeping him from being happy and active like the other boys. A lead curtain of sadness he just couldn't lift. You know, I'm sure it had to do with divorce. It had to. I can't tell you how many times I'd seen him run in my room and cry. He thought I didn't see him, but I saw. I saw how those tears just fell from his face all the time. I saw how the divorce tore him apart. It was horrible. And then one night, we were eating supper in the living room. Things felt normal. And then he asked me if I'd get him a gun. A gun. He said it was for protection. Protection. I didn't believe in having guns. I still don't believe in having guns. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think he might use it on himself. The kid was just too unhappy. It breaks my heart, you know, because he was a good kid. What'd they do to him? Why couldn't anyone help him?